Hello again. So I actually have notes with me this time because last video I kind of just yapped and I didn't get any clear points across because it's immediately one of those videos where you're like, yeah, I regret that. That's a bad video. I'm not gonna remove it, but I realized as I was talking, I was sitting there like I definitely talked for at least 20 minutes or so, and I look at it as I'm uploading and it's only like 11 minutes and I'm like, surely that was longer than that. And it just was me just blathering out with incoherent points. So now I brought myself a note on my phone to keep me going straight, and I literally have as the first talking point, talk about regretting videos and my first video. So which is funny because in that first video I didn't even properly explain any of this. I think I did, but it wasn't properly explained at all. So that is literally the next thing coming up, where I also realized I didn't talk at all about moving out. I just kind of talked about my feelings about moving out, so it doesn't really matter. So there will be a part 2 to that life video of moving out, where I actually talk about, hey, this is what it was like for me moving out. This is how it went. And it will be just about that instead of just this general rambling conversation, which I like rambling, but it has to be rambling about something interesting, not rambling without a point. And so, speaking of, besides all these talk videos, there will be other videos that are still gaming. I think I mentioned that in the old one. I don't know. I don't remember. Don't care to go back. Like I said, regret it already. I will still be doing gaming videos. I don't think I'll do Calamity again. Well, I think I'll go back to the Calamity series at some point, but at the moment I want to definitely move on to a new plan I have, because I was only playing Calamity until Cult of the Lamb came out with its new DLC with co-op. I want to try and play that with my brother. We'll see if we can do that together. Besides that, we're also going to try to win in a few days from now. It'll probably a few days from now, there's going to be the Dredge DLC. Dredge is a fun game. It's a fishing simulator with Lovecraft horror. Very fun. I'm also going to be doing that as a video. Besides that, so I still got gaming videos. I still got streams, but I'm going to be laying off on live streams unless I really just don't have any time to make a video for that week. I do want to try to make videos at least once a week, maybe twice a week if I'm putting in these talk videos, which don't really take a lot of effort to edit and prepare. Just me talking to the camera with a microphone in front of me. And if I can get it past 11 minutes and not ramble on. So what this whole series about, of these Jade talks about, will mainly not be super heavy life stories. They will mainly just be me rambling on about things I like, which will be a lot of times be lore. I'm looking at you, Matt, Pat, and Nuxtaku. There will be a new lore master in town eventually, if I can get up there. We'll see about it. But yes, I'm here to talk about lore, because I like a whole lot of different things, which is interesting when I talk about Nuxtaku, because I'm watching him go through, as Lord Nuxalore, going through all these different fandoms, and there's so many times like, I remember when I was younger, and I learned about that. This would be cool to see his reaction. And then on the flip side, when I don't know the thing he's watching about, I'm like, okay, Nux, stop talking. I want to enjoy this video. Which he actually points out in the videos, but that's not the point. But so today is going to be a lore video about Terraria Calamity, which will be interesting since what we're talking about is a mod for a game called, well, it's a mod for Terraria. And the funny thing, this mod, Calamity Mod, has lore older than the lore that Terraria has, which is a little dumb that this mod came up with a story before the main game came up with a story. And they're very different stories. Of course they are. One was made by people who weren't the developers of Terraria. But I always, I kind of like both stories, which is weird because they're definitely separate. One's a very different form of story. But I find it hilarious that Calamity is older in lore than Terraria itself is older than making a story. They have a few elements that are the same, considering they are the same game at the base. But the big thing is that's not technically true anymore, because Calamity recently went through a massive rework of all its lore, where it went from old lore to a complete rewrite of new lore. And me being a bit of an old man, and like, no, I like the old lore. The old lore's cool, and it's what I know, and it's so much more grand than the new lore. But I have come to admit over time that the new lore that that Calamity has in its game as of the present date is way more coherent than the old one was, and makes a lot more of logistical sense, even though it's just a fantasy story, when it comes to the game and the story it's trying to tell. So I'll give it props, it fits it all together better, but man, I like the old one. So we're talking about old Calamity lore, which gets further complicated because there are so many different things about it. It's been changed so many times, but it kind of had this general running theme before the massive reboot of the lore that you can currently find in the current Calamity mod, unless they somehow change it again and make this whole video, well, no, I won't make it irrelevant, but the new lore suddenly becomes middle lore, and now there's new lore, middle lore, old lore, but that's a whole thing. There was this whole thing called the CAL, which was the Calamity Archived Lore, and it was this massive Google Doc that held all the old lore of the series, and then all the cut lore, and all the other pieces that never got put in the game. It was massive and big. There was a lot to this, and I liked to piece it all together, and I kind of want to give it here. The problem I'm going to admit with that is there is headcanons, and I will try my best to go, hey, this is my headcanon. This is how I like to piece this together. But there may be bits and pieces here and there where it has been, where my headcanon has merged into the lore, and I have just forgotten what's real and what's not, because it is old. It's no longer presented in the game, but I just want to talk about it. So, yeah, we're talking about old Calamity lore in this video, because it is fun. We start, as all good stories do, in the beginning. The literal beginning of the universe. And as it would be fitting of Terraria world, it gets split into two forces. There's the light, and there's the dark. And they kind of go about doing their things with, from these two forces, there's the light gods, which come to embody, if I remember correctly, literally light, life, hope. It's light, creation, harmony, and like order. So they're all about like these peaceful things on this side of a spectrum. And then literally darkness is all about war, chaos, destruction, and darkness. All these other things. And how it goes. So the light gods are the ones that go out and create the universe. It's literally part of their portfolio. They like creating things. So they go out and create things. And they don't like when the dark gods go and destroy all the things they make. And so, being gods of peace, they literally are like, hey, what if we had a treaty? And they make a treaty. I don't know how the dark gods ever agree to this treaty. It's dumb. Well, no, that's not dumb. But they do, when it is entirely opposite of their purpose of making war. They don't like this treaty. They don't like it from the beginning, but somehow the light gods convince them, hey, let's not break everything. And so they do. They make a treaty, and it's cool and dandy, and the light gods keep spreading out throughout the universe, making things. And one of them's our world that is called Terraria, or whatever the Terraria world in the Calamity lore is called. And from there, it literally goes on and on until the dark gods get so annoyed by the peace treaty that they just They just straight up break it. They're like, no, you know what? Time for war. And they go in and they just start killing all the light gods. Because, well, they're gods literally of war and destructions. They have all the superpowers. They just start beating up all the light gods. And the light gods are like, oh no, wait, guys, time out. Let's do peace, since it's part of their, like, being. It's all they know is peace. And the dark gods are like, no, it's time for war. Let's break everything. All of the universe be in darkness because that's our deal. Let's all be evil and all that. And it gets to a point where there is the light gods, and the light gods are basically like, hey, there's not many of us left. We gotta deal with the dark gods. And so what they do is all the light gods kind of merge together into one. And then, like, the oldest of them, I think he's mentioned to be the first of the light gods. His name is Exarok. When they all merge, Exarok kind of is the one who takes over this super being that they become. Because he was the oldest of the light gods, so he becomes this now mega god. I think it's literally called a super god or something. And this new super god is basically a being of all light in existence, and he just goes to the dark gods, and it goes from being a war between the two to just a one-sided massacre as Exarok just obliterates all the dark gods but two. He wipes out the whole population of gods to being just two and him, because all the light gods merged into him. And after this, he literally is just like, you know what? I now name myself the supreme being of all the universe. I take the title because I am therefore the strongest being in this whole universe, that I am now the great sovereign over everything. He took the big G God title of, I'm in authority of everything simply because I have the power to do so. That was his kind of MO, where he's like, yeah, this is how we're gonna do. And those two dark gods fled. They went into hiding because they realized, oh crap, we all just got killed. We have to get revenge, even though this is all their fault in the first place. Don't get me on that. Well, we're on it. But so Exarok is like, yes, I am the big G now. Now, where do those two go? I need to kill them. I don't like having any dark gods left because they, try to kill all of his light people. And let it be put, Exarok is not a good guy. He's a being of order, creation, and light, and peace, yes, but never goodness, or like life, or kindness. He is just like searing light and perfect order to the most extreme, especially because they're all merged together. So him being like, I'm this big guy on top, is just this massive complex of, I'm literally the most superior being in existence now, and no one can tell me what to do. I can do anything because I am the most powerful. And so where were we? So these two dark gods, we'll switch to them. They kind of they're in hiding. They flee, and the world they flee to happens to be Terraria, the main setting of everything. This planet, which I don't think it ever gets a name, but it's the planet of Terraria. I'll call it Terraria. They get there, and they're like, let's get revenge, and let's make a super weapon, like how the light gods did, because that totally worked out for them. Let's make a weapon that can kill Exarok. And actually, I think I gotta back up a little to explain the world. So, what has been Terraria doing ever since it got created? Before the dark gods arrive, we get to Terraria, and Terraria at this point is kind of like primordial soup, just a bunch of like magic and things and everything in this ball, and which is a planet, yeah. And so Terraria, the world, the first beings of life that emerge from it are the elementals, literal living manifestations of the natural forces that were like raging across the world itself. So you had, I think there were 5. The oldest was the water elemental, and we'll get to her later. And then there's the sand elemental, the cloud. Basically, there's the four elements, and then there's the brimstone elemental, who was the last of them and the strongest. And so there's these elementals that are like ruling the planet, guiding its like ancient life forms. Is that what they did? And then in turn they were worshipped. And being worshipped, they had cities built out of them. Like the water elemental, her whole deal is she was the oldest, and so she made the oldest kingdom, this great ocean kingdom. But eventually, the people of that city forgot about her because it was so old that they forgot their history and literally decided, so she's always been kind to us and giving us power. But what if we get more power? And there's this guy who's like, yes, I'm going to steal the power of the goddess of water, or elemental of water of the oceans, who is literally bankrolling our entire civilization, and decides, yeah, I want some more of that. He does it. And what this does is piss off the water elemental, who I think's name is Anathelia. I can't do names. She looks like a mermaid woman with a trident. To get so pissed off that she completely like goes from gentle tides woman to angry storm siren woman and completely wipes out this ancient civilization. No signs of it. Nothing. It's gone. Not even like a biome in the game. And nowadays she just kind of sits there alone because she feels terrible for what she did, but she's never willing to forgive it from happening either. Just alone in the ocean. Until she meets this massive primordial Leviathan, and that's how you get that boss. That's the Leviathan and this water elemental. She's like the ancient first life form. Besides all this, there's the elemental. Besides the elementals, there were the dragons. At least my head can't. Well, no, not headcanon yet. I think this is when the Age of Dragons was, when there's like, hey, all these true dragons are around being big and strong. And besides them, there were the Dryads, which, yeah, headcanon, I like to believe, are the daughters of the goddess of life, Sylvia, who I think is like a super druid, or super dryad, I guess you could say. Sylvia, goddess of life, the first true goddess of all this, is this woman. And the dryads, the dragons, and the elementals all kind of were ruling over this world, which comes into a point where the two dark gods have arrived and are like, let's build a weapon. And so what they do, these two massive cosmic beings of darkness, who we'll name Cthulhu, this is Cthulhu is one of them, and the Moon Lord is the other one. So the big squid-facey people are the dark gods. So the dark gods are just eldritch horrors coming in, and I think the light gods are just biblically accurate angels. So it's biblically accurate angels versus eldritch abominations, which is a kind of cool combo to be kind of running the scale of the universe. And so you have these two fighting people kind of going at it each other, and then wait, no, I backed up too far. So the two dark gods, Cthulhu and Moon Lord, arrive at the planet, and they see, there's these elementals, there's these dryads, and there's these dragons. Let's break it all, because, they're dark gods, they're of destruction. And they start this massive war, where I'm not sure who the winner is. Actually, I think I know what happens, but we'll get there. But anyway, there's this massive war where, like, a bunch of the dryads give up all their lives. All the dragons a lot of them end up dying to where their age of dragons is no longer there. The elementals all kind of step away from the world as a result of this war. But during the course of this war, I think this is when the dark gods are, like, making these ancient otherworldly labs and are experimenting with things and are creating weapons of war and magic and just dark creations to fight against Exarok, and they're using this war as like their testing grounds for battle. And it comes to a head where I think the corruption itself in the Calamity lore is a bioweapon that was made in this war as like a proto weapon to kill Exarok. And what happens is they finally make their weapon. They call it Noxus, and Noxus is like this uber powerful dark being who's like weapon, this super weapon of darkness to kill the supreme god himself. And from there, one moment, drink break. From there, what I think happens is the dryads and dragons who gave their lives managed to push these dark gods back, but it wasn't enough because they still had Noxus. And then Exarok finds the planet, and he doesn't care about the fighting. That's like the thing. He's not a good guy. He's just the guy in charge who, he had reasonable reasons for killing all the dark gods, but he's not a good guy himself. He sees this war, and he doesn't try to stop it. He just looks at the two dark gods, and he's like, you know what? Let's kill them. And immediately... So they immediately are like releasing Noxus to fight Exarok, and Noxus runs away. Noxus is like, I'm not old enough and strong enough to fight Exarok yet. Noxus leaves, and the two dark gods try to fight Exarok on their own, and Cthulhu gets completely obliterated. Single blow, smashed against the pavement. And his body literally turns into the evil biome, the Crimson, which is literally his body trying to slowly reform, because it was this thing where... and the Moon Lord himself, like, loses his eyes, loses, like, his brain and all these things, and gets cut in half by Exarok, and then imprisoned in the moon, which is why he's called the Moon Lord, which is super cool. And so Exarok, after he beats up the dark gods, he just leaves. He doesn't even help the dryads who have to pick up the pieces, or the dragons who are now like on the verge of extinction, or the elementals who all were like, hey, we can't really take more proper form anymore. And he just leaves. The only time he comes back is when he like is there to interrogate the Moon Lord, which is why there's blood moons in Terraria. The lore reason there's blood moons is Exarok is torturing the Moon Lord, and it's turning red from the god's blood on the moon because he's getting tortured for information, because Noxus vanished, and he's like, there's this threat out there that you all made that can kill me. Tell me where it is. And Noxus itself actually is now like fleeing through the darkness of the universe, gaining strength by consuming worlds and planets Galactus style, and from himself comes this super corrosive astral infection, which even goes on to like infect stars and corrupt the very fabric of the laws of nature, as like this embodiment of what darkness represents in the Terraria world. And all that goes on. And from this fighting, I like to headcanon that this war, this massive war between like the Dryads and everything, darkness and light and Exarok, is what births Providence. And Providence is this super-powered goddess creature thing. She's called the Profane Goddess, and her whole deal is fire that's neutral. She's not light or dark. Her only role is to burn it all away, frenzied flame style. Just everything gone into ash, because in ash there's purity. There's no evil, there's no pain. Everything is just dead, in this singular fanatical desire to burn everything down. I like to headcanon that this is the war where she's born from, but I don't quite know. She could get born in a later war, which we'll get to. There's a lot of wars in a series called Calamity. I think it's literally called Tales of a Broken World is the tale. The big whatever it's just called, description of this place, of the story of that they're trying to make in Calamity. And so what believes this is this broken planet which just been through a godly war twice over, and humanity is kind of, and all the races are kind of just picking up the pieces, kind of going about just like, okay, ruling, and like there's this whole deal where like a bunch of different kingdoms are rising up, and it mentions that in this period of time where like without the Age of Dragons or anything, and before the next major event, there's just a bunch of like city states rising and falling in each biome, and each one vies for powers, but each one gets replaced by a new leadership, except in the jungle, which is apparently the oldest of these kingdoms to have survived, because it's ruled by these jungle kings, this council of elder kings that have kept power for a long time. But they've kept it so long, they're starting to get paranoid, and it's starting to show cracks in their rule. And it's in the Jungle Kingdom that I like to think, the main character, my favorite character in all of Calamity, the Jungle Tyrant himself, the big final boss who still hasn't came out in the game, the Jungle Tyrant, Jungle King Yarhim is born. But at this point, he's just a boy. And in the old lore, he had a mother who gets mentioned once defeated. She had who we only ever get a description of the mother from this bow in the game, which said, "Hey, Yarm's mother was a big peacemaker, but she was willing to fight when necessary," which made it sound a lot like she's kind of like a hero or whatever of the old age and kind of like didn't really like what the Jungle Kings would be doing during this current time, and she tried to teach her son to be peaceful as well, which will be relevant later in a tragic way, that she's like, "Hey son, only fight when necessary." He don't do that. He don't do that. Spoilers, he called the tyrant. I'll give you 3 guesses what this man end up doing later. But like this bow is called Astrel's Defeat, which means she beat something called Astrel, and like Astrel is like this ethereal and astral mixed together, so it makes me think like she beat up this like starry being or something, which was super cool in the past, and like Beaten was this hero. And like this headcanon I have, as I always like to think that Yarm's mother was a dryad, because yeah, it would make sense. She probably fought in this ancient space horror war and is like seeing how the Jungle Kings are growing more corrupt, and is like, "Hey, son, don't be like them." And this is also where I headcanon, which this is actually a headcanon that is firmly against the lore, because there was old concept art of Yaram that had it where his armor had claws on the feet, where it made him look like he had clawed feet, and I thought that was awesome. But they specifically mentioned in the concept art, he's not supposed to have clawed feet, and I ignored that, because I'm like, man, it'd be cool if he had clawed feet. So I like to imagine, because in the jungle there's a lizard race, in fact there's like a NPC, the witch doctor, that's a lizard person that you can go to, that he's like a hybrid. Like Yaram's this guy who's part lizardman, part dryad, so he's kind of like a demigod, which would make sense considering his rival for way later, we'll get to it, Braylor was a demigod as well, and they were mentioned to be the only two who could ever match each other's strength. Like Yarm was the only one who ever fought Braylor and didn't immediately die, and Braylor was the only one Yarm's like, yeah, he's the only one as strong as me. So if Braylor is a demigod, I'm assuming Yarm's a demigod, and Braylor has a lot of life connections, which we'll get to. So we get to Yaram, and he's this kid under his mother, and what his mother does is she gives him a dragon egg, and she says, "Hey, this is the last dragon egg of the true dragons, because all the dragons are dead, or gone, kind of." And this makes sense because the dryads and the dragons got along. That's why I'm saying she's a dryad. Why would she have the dragon egg? Which also the dragons lived in the jungle. But anyway, what it is Yaram has this brother, and Yaram is part of this priesthood, which we know there's a priesthood with the lizardmen who worship the sun through this golem, which is a thing of light, which this ancient cult that was done by Yaram's brother was directed toward Exarok. Which makes sense. This big thing of light came down, literally shot 2 cosmic cores in the face and left. Of course, there's going to be people worshipping it. But the thing that was bad is this cult was slowly growing in power, and it was challenging the jungle cult's power, and Yaram's brother was like being a brat and like being super arrogant and being like, yeah, we're the followers of this god, you can't do anything about us. And it gets to a point where, to gain more influence, Yaram's brother steals this item called the Terminus, which was said to be like a beacon to attract Noxus, the big super weapon, and uses it thinking it would summon Exarok. And the bad part, he wasn't wrong, because it sent out this like dark signal that Exarok immediately went, what's that over there? Went exploring, came back to the planet, summoned himself, but he didn't like the fact that he thought these lowly creatures had the audacity to summon him without permission. And so when he showed up before the cult, he showed up in this form that drove them all mad, because he's like, that's what you get for thinking you dare had any authority, that I would be at your beck and call. That's the kind of supreme being we're dealing with here. And it drives like the entire cult and his brother insane. And this is exactly the excuse the jungle kings need. Go like, yeah, let's get rid of the cult. And so they round the cult up, they imprison all the families, and you know what they do? You know what the jungle kings do to make this all go away? They don't just imprison them and go like, yeah, dismantle the cult and we'll never deal with you again. No, they literally drag all the cult members, all of Yaram, his mother, his family, maybe his dad too. No mention of dad anywhere in the lore. And they don't just toss them into fire, they toss them into hell, because the underworld's a thing that exists in Terraria as a physical place. They literally drag them down to hell and toss them into the lava. So little Yaram, who was taught whole life, value peace, gets dragged down to hell and tossed in to die, and he watches his family burn before him. And the only reason he lives, because he gets burned, is the heat of hell itself is the one thing that cracks the dragon egg, and it births Yara. It's going to be complicated. There's Yarim, the main character, and his dragon, Yaran. Yaran. I think it's Yaran. Or is it Jaran? Have I been saying it wrong? Is it Jarim and Jaran? Jaran and Jaram? Or I'm going to keep saying Yaram. Yeah, Yarim and Yaran. Yaran is the last true dragon. He's like the prince of dragons. He's like the only one who can restore the age. And his whole thing is he's the dragon of rebirth. He has this power over this fire of rebirth. He's basically a phoenix dragon. And his whole deal is, as a phoenix, he can die as many times as he needs, but he can be reborn. And what he does is because he was given as an egg to Yaram, he and Yaram are bound together like their souls are. And so they literally have this thing where as long as Yaram's alive, Yaram can die and be reborn, which is super important later on. But Yaran saves Yaram's life, and they're in hell together, and Yaran completely loses it. He is scarred, burned, done with everything. But the boy now is angry. He is furious. He hates not only the Jungle Kings for what they did, but he hates God himself for what they did to his brother. He now vows to go out on a war to end everything, because he wants to go fight God personally and make him pay for what he did to his brother. But first he needs to get more power. And so single-handedly, overnight, this whole corrupt Jungle Kings thing, all their thrones, all their councils get broken, because Yaram comes up back. He's like, did you miss me? And kills all of them. All the kings die in a single night as Yaram takes control of the Jungle Kingdom. And however, I think it gets mentioned in super, super old lore that he's too strong, or I think it's more that he's scarred, because what happens is he realizes, man, I'm strong. I literally killed all these guys. I took control. But no one is going to, like, not everyone's going to just let me be a tyrant and be okay with it. I need ways to defend myself. And so he sends this message out going like, hey, I'll give you whatever you want if you come serve me. Join my cohorts and you will personally, like, I will personally get you whatever you desire. And so this message kind of zooms off throughout the universe. And it comes to this planet where it's an empty, dead metal planet. And inside this metal planet is this little guy called Jade, who is basically Ultron, but he had a singular desire to just make fidget spinners or whatever. He's literally Ultron, but his only role, with all the lack of morals, is to invent and create and figure out new things. That's Draydon's deal. He just wants to find out new stuff. And so he gets this message going like, there's this guy offering me infinite, like, resources and stuff just to protect him. Alright, I'm dig. And he takes this dead planet and builds a spaceship out of scrap, sends it down to Terraria, shows up at Yarm like, hey, I heard you needed someone. And this robot goes and builds him this as like this almost like introduction, like his interview is this armor made with the power of stars and the divine energies of the universe called the Arc Tesla armor. And he makes this like, hey, this is my best work. Which it is. It literally becomes uncreatable later on because he makes sure never to make something that good again. Because what it does is this armor heals Yaram, grants him magic, and then boosts his power while also allowing him to fully express his power without hurting himself. And so it's like this life support. So it becomes like a golden Darth Vader from all these lava scars. And he has this sword that's forged with the hatred and the shattered stones of the swords of the thrones of the Thunder King, which is super cool. He has this massive, like, great sword. Yaram's a great character. I personally like him a lot. And Draydon becomes like his closest friend. So it's Draydon, Yaran, and Yarm are like making this council that are like thinking, let's go and not destroy the world. They haven't got to that part yet. Spoiler. So they go on, and Yarn is like, no, not Yarn. Yaram's like, alright, who else can we get? And he hears word of the Archmage, this guy called Permafrost. And Permafrost lives in, well, this icy palace, because he's the Archwizard. And Permafrost's whole deal is, he's the greatest wizard in the world, but he never found a perfect student, because all his students kept using his arts for evil. And so what he did is he locked himself in his secrets in his tower, going like, no one will ever learn it. And he enchanted himself to be able to see into the hearts of people to gauge if they're worthy, and no one has ever been. And so one day, this cloaked individual, who I have to imagine was very inconspicuous, considering Yarm is like a few meters tall, or whatever. Like, man is standing almost 10 feet tall if you look at his concept art. Man in a cloak, who's also a giant, shows up and is like, hey, teach me. I can use this power to bring order to the world, to make sure bad things never happen again. Or whatever. He's like, hey, you should join, like, the jungle and all this. And Permafrost looks into his eyes and he's like, man, I don't know what pain you went through, but this ain't right. And so Yarm's like, nods his head solemnly, like, alright, I respect your decision to not join me, and leaves. But then proceeds to curse the tower to collapse in on itself around the Archmage as a final, I can't have your secrets, no one can. And that's why in the game you find the Archmage NPC trapped in a frozen crystal because Yaram shoved him in there for not teaching him his magics. And so he needed to find someone else to be his mage. Which brings us to the character the whole story is named after. But not the main character. Well, you can argue she's the main character, but I think it's the Jungle Tyrant. But Calamitous is just as good. She is the name that everything is came from. Calamitous is a girl who is from the Brimstone City. So the Brimstone Elemental, the last of them and the strongest, she was the only one who kind of was like, hey, I'm still going to do this whole civilization thing. And she built this whole city. It's called, I think, Azafar, the first city. I think it's called the first city. But whatever it is, it's this city built in hell itself and is this massive forgery city. And it's ruled by a super strict caste system where the top of the caste are these superpowered dark mages and necromancers. And what happens is, long ago, Calamitous' family got banished from Azafar or the Brimstone City or whatever because they didn't like the caste system. They didn't like this old form of government or whatever. And they literally go in and it's like, hey, or no, they get banished, so they leave. They get banished to like the surface and they kind of like go into hiding and they're like living. And what they learn is that without the brimstone flames of the elemental, their magic is still with them, but it turns to a darker source that is much stronger. Like literally the flames of the city was a buffer to keep out the true dark magic. But they were good people. So these people with this dark magic that was inside their lineage kind of just used it to help people. And there comes down to a point where Calamitous is born, and one day she's out, and when she gets home, she finds her entire family burned to a stake, including her brothers, because some people found their family practicing these dark magics, and like, they're witches, burn them down. And Calamitous is just, she snaps, she loses it. And she literally is mentioned to be the strongest mage in the entire world at that moment, because her dark magic just erupts from her rage at seeing her family dead. And she kills that entire village and is haunted by their ghosts now. And she revives her brothers to serve as her bodyguards because she's this uber necromancer and fire wizard. And she doesn't know what it is. She's like this lost little girl. She's young, but she's super powered, and she gets called by this unknown calling towards the jungle where she meets Yaram, and he offers her like a new family at his side with Jade and Yaram and all of them. And they kind of form like this council of generals to go and conquer the world. And and so she literally she's the only one that Yaram ever feared that was part of his council, that he was ever like, man, she might be able to kill me if she ever turned against me. So he kept close eyes on Calamitous, which is good and bad for various points in this timeline. So we have Calamitous doing her thing. And so after Sea Kingdom. Yeah. So one of these kingdoms is the Sea Kingdom, which isn't ruled by people. It's actually ruled by a bunch of merfolk who are super peaceful and have always wanted to be like, no, let's not intervolve ourselves with all the surface kingdoms and their stupid wars with each other that's been going on for thousands of years. And, like with permafrost, Yaram shows up and is like, hey, come join me. And he actually kind of gives a bit of his plan. He's like, let's break out the Moon Lord so we can use the Moon Lord against Exarok kind of deal. Crazy. And that's like his big plan, is to get strong enough to break the Moon Lord out of the moon. Because he wants the Moon Lord's power to kill Exarok, God, pretty much. And the king of the merfolk is like, looks at him and goes, no, that's stupid. stupid. Why would we try to fight God? And no, we won't help in some surface kingdom's war. And Yarm goes, like he did with Permasus, goes, good day. Alright, we'll see you all later. And then tells Calamitous, burn it all to the ground. This is like the first showcasing of her power, where she's like, prove yourself to me, Calamitous. And so he has this little brimstone witch girl turn the entire ocean into a desert. Her flames literally turn that entire ocean, and like all its creatures just dead in an instant. Only the king survives because like he hid in this clam, and there's like the sunken sea. That's why there's the sunken sea beneath the desert, because it used to be an ocean that Calamitous raised to the ground with all her magic, because she's that strong that she just turned another biome into a much worse biome, you could say. And from there we go to where do we go? So while in there, that's why there's also the desert scourges. There's these big sea serpents that now are dehydrated, that are one of the bosses you can fight. And also, some of them flee to the other oceans, which we'll then get like later on. We'll get to. At some point, I might in these videos, I'll put pictures up to like help me explain everything I'm talking about. But not this one. You're just gonna have to imagine it all or look it up whenever I say it. Wow, this is actually going on for a while. Luckily, I think we're almost done. No, we're not. So we have Yarm's kind of doing these atrocities now, like ravaging the world, conquering all, looking for ways to break the Moon Lord out. And what happens is a rebellion forms against him, but this rebellion was there already fighting the original Jungle Kings. And it was led by Braylor. I mentioned him before. He's a demigod. But Braylor wasn't the start of it. The start of this rebellion is literally like, I think, his name's Status, and he's the last of this line of ninjas that have always stayed in these mountains and the jungles, who worshipped the slime god, which is another boss you can fight in the game. And like their whole deal was like, they worshipped the slime god and they stayed away, and Status was like given all their secrets, but he would be the last of their tribe because they all died out in this big assault by the Jungle Kings. And so he set out to bring it into the Jungle Kings to bring the truth of their corruption to bear. And he goes to this guy Braylor, who's just this like Hercules guy who is just in the woods helping his home village until like the Jungle Kings tell him, hey, join us because your kingdom's going to be, or your town's going to be destroyed by this enemy of ours, only to find out through Status that no, the Jungle Kings are going to kill his village to make sure that he serves them and make it look like it was some other people, so he never has any connections to go back to, which, you know, not a good thing. So Braylor leaves and now leads this rebellion against the Jungle Kings, but they never get a chance to beat the Jungle Kings because Yarm comes up and breaks them all. He destroys everything. And now we're getting to this point where Braylor and Status are now trying and fighting Yarm, and they're constantly now on the back foot, where once against the Jungle Kings, who were kind of incompetent, given, you know, they burned a whole family alive and now it killed them, are on the back foot with Yarm, who's just showing up, wrecking all their stuff. And it comes to the point where Sylvia herself gets so appalled with all the lives lost in Yarm conquering all these kingdoms across the Terrarian world that she joins the rebellion. So this rebellion now has 3 people: the Goddess of Life, Status, who is this ninja with slime powers, with slimy, hardened slime armor, and Braylor, who wears armor made of bark because he promised he'd never harm like an innocent thing, I think, or something like that. But he was like this guy super close to nature, which his bark armor is why I think he's a dryad. We won't get into it. Video's already gone quite a bit. Yeah, I thought 20 minutes would be fine. And they're like fighting the rebellion, and they just never can beat Yarm. And then it gets to the point And then, so one of the cities who actually so that's the funny thing. Anytime anyone poses proper resistance, Yarm's just like, hey, Calamitous, blow him up for me. And so so he gets to the Brimstone City, which Calamitous has no idea was actually the homeland where her parents came from. And so when it resists Yaram, she goes in to blow it up, and the Brimstone Elemental comes out to fight her. And so what Calamitous does is she makes the Brimstone Elemental go insane with her dark magic, that it turns against its own citizens and raises its own city down, because Calamitous is really powerful of a witch. And what this does is some of the cast members, those high-end mages, they try to stop it by doing this big necromantic spell that creates the Ravager, this big thing of bone and metal, and not metal, bone and souls and flesh, and it goes and kills them all. And Calamitous is like, my work here is done, and leaves the city to the devices of the Ravager and Brimstone, just wrecking everything and ruining that kingdom. And there's so many people dying and prisoners and all this that the dungeon. Apparently it was like the capital of this other kingdom, but it was used to execute so many prisoners and used in so many experiments for these prisoners that the ghosts of the prisoners literally started costing more lives to guard the prison than it was to kill the prisoners. And so Yaram just abandons the dungeon because he killed so many people. The dungeon came to life with undead creatures, all resenting him, which is a super cool thing. With one of the bosses, the poltergeist is literally like, it attacks. It's trying to get revenge on Yaram, and it will attack anyone that it deems as powerful as, which is an interesting thing because you only fight it super late in the game when you're reaching the point that you're close to Yaram's power, that it can't recognize you or Yaram any differently, which is super cool. And then the dungeon, like all those bodies and blood and everything, they get dumped out into this ocean, which is why it turns into the sulfuric sea, because it's also dumped with radiation from Dradon's experiments and his labs that he put all across the land. And Dradon has been kind of just chilling this whole time. He made Yaram super god armor and left and did his own thing. And like one of his projects is Yaram's like, hey, let's save the dragons, because the one guy he cares about is his dragon Yaran. And so they try to clone him, and it doesn't work. That's why there's dragonflies all everywhere. And then he tries to clone, and then they try to clone Calamitous, which doesn't work. But Yaram still is like, that clone is good enough. That's a backup plan in case Calamitous ever turns against me. I have a clone of her in the storage. However, Dradon is going through this thing, studying all these things. He discovers the astral infection one day through this meteorite, and he sends like this robot to go look at it. And what happens is he finds out, oh wow, this infection doesn't just corrupt life. They can corrupt AI and machines. Huh. I can learn more about this instead of being super terrified that it can warp all of reality. And he takes the knowledge of that to go like, I can make my own super plague. And so he makes this super bioweapon virus, and he shoves it in a bunch of queen bees from the jungle, which actually pisses off Yaram because he's like, those are innocent creatures. Not like he's one to talk. He literally murders so many kingdoms just because they wouldn't join him in this crazy crusade against the moon. But it drives this wedge between their relationship that Dradon no longer is his best friend because he made this super bioweapon plague. But he still is supplying Yaram's army with like its super weapons and war machines. Like he's even taking the dead souls of Yaram's soldiers to make mechanical monsters to fight for Yaram. And it kind of comes ahead where I cannot talk that long. Oh wow. Okay. Catch my breath for a moment. So yeah, Draydon makes all these war machines, but it gets to the point where Calamitous is given her final task. So she like blew up the Sea Kingdom, blew up the underworld itself, and then she gets told by Yarm, "Hey, go kill life itself. You know Sylvia? She's been a thorn in my side. Go get rid of her." And she goes to get rid of like Sylvia, and they fight, and it's an even match, which just goes to show you how crazy that Calamitous is, that she's fighting the goddess who is the embodiment of all life on that planet. And she ends up killing her, but then she finds out, oh, I can't kill life itself without killing everything. And so to keep Sylvia from reforming, throws her in the irradiated ocean that Draydon had been dumping all his waste, so it would constantly melt her body down, so she'd never reform. That's why there's like a bunch of plants in the abyss or whatever, which is the deepest part of the ocean down there. And so Calamitous is like at this point where she's like tired of killing. She only killed that village in like a rage. She wasn't a bad person. She never wanted this crusade. Like a lot of the people are like kind of questioning Yarm's crusade because it's killed a lot of people now. And when it comes to a point where I think she discovers the clone because she starts snooping around. And when she finds the clone, she gets so disgusted, she breaks it out, lets it wreak havoc across like the jungle, and flees. And by doing so, Braylor and Statius, who even without the goddess are like, oh wow, Calamitous is gone. This is our one chance we have to attack Yarm. And when they do, they attack. What was it? Was it? No. Back up. Ignore that. That's wrong. I got the timeline a bit wrong. Braylor and Status don't attack just yet. They do soon, but they're kind of like, oh no, goddess gone. That's bad. Who might be Braylor's mom? Ooh, he's a demigod. She's a goddess. So there is Braylor. No. So yeah, Calamitous leaves, and this is kind of when Providence wakes up, who is kind of like, there's still a massive war going on. Let's burn it all down. And this is the one time Yarm himself is like, man, I lost that fight. Because he has to go out personally to fight Providence, who is this massive goddess of fire, who almost threatens to burn down the jungle. And he has to fight her one-on-one because she brutalizes his entire armies, crushes all his forces. And he only wins because he's like, I may have lost you personally, but I drained you of all your energies. And she couldn't fight any longer, and so she fled into the sun to recharge her energies, and that's where she is in the current setting, trying to recharge enough energy to just destroy the planet in one fell swoop, like blow it all up in fire. And it's that attack by Providence that Braylor and Status are like, wow, Yarm's actually weakened. Let's go and kill him. Because that's in this big, massive tyrant that's been killing everyone. And Yarm's like, I'm really at a loss of what to do. Until he gets word of, like, this big worm in the sky that killed a god. Because there's this thing called the Devourer of Gods that had just eaten this the god of the scars, Astrum Deus, who's one of the bosses you can fight, who gets infected by astral infection because his dead corpse gets taken over by it because he got brutalized by the Devourer. And Yarm finds the Devourer and he's like, hey, you're super strong. Can you kill Braylor and Status for me? I'll reward you. And Braylor and so the Devourer's like, yeah, sure. And he basically makes a deal with the devil with this massive devouring dark worm creature to kill Braylor and Status, who like warps them into this other world and kills them both, and then is rewarded with this cosmic armor built by Draydon, which was made with a personal flaw just in case this super powerful worm devouring or god devouring worm entity can't ever turn against him because he put a flaw in the armor. And so with that, we get to the point where it's the Devourer of Gods, Yaram and Drayden, who are kind of doing their thing, and technically Calamitous, because Yaram curses her with this curse where she's always forced to come back to his side, no matter how much she resists it. So she's now kind of there as a slave where she was once there as a friend, which, messed up, but this man's done a lot of messed up things at this point. Why add mind control on the list? And he gets to the point where he finally finds the pieces and he's like, all right, I can summon the Moon Lord. I can take his power. And he goes to do it. And he fails because the one who stops him is the lunatic cultist who's actually trying to keep the Moon Lord sealed in the moon. And this is my super headcanon. The reason Yaram stops his pursuit, because that's what happens. When he faces the lunatic cultist, he calls off the war. This is the end of it. He faces this little blue man in a plague doctor mask and is like, no, I'm done. So I was always like, what would ever make the Tyrant King to just stop his rampage because some little blue man prevented him from summoning the Moon Lord? It didn't stop him from blowing up permafrost. It didn't stop him from destroying the Sea Kingdoms or whatever, or anything else in his way, or like the rebellion. I like to headcanon that the lunatic cultist was his brother, who's now so insane he now worships Exorox and is now this lunatic cultist who is like, I'm going to keep the Moon Lord in the moon because that is what my god wants. And so Yaram is like, I can't kill my own brother. It's the one thing he probably won't do is kill his brother. So he kind of enters this super depression because his whole life purpose of revenge fails by falling flat on its face because he failed to get the Moon Lord's power. And so what he kind of does is he goes out on his own, all by himself, to go fight Exorox by himself. And he actually manages to find Exorox, and he goes to fight him with all his power that he gained. And Exorox beats him in a single blow, and it kind of breaks Yaram's will. And so in the state of the game, when you boot up Terraria the Calamity Mod and play the game as your little guy building and beating bosses and getting stronger, you're playing in the broken kingdom of Yaram, and the only reason he never stops you from killing all of his men or anything, he's too depressed. He's sitting on his throne, just depressed and empty, like, my entire life purpose is a lie. I want you to erase everything I did away. And yeah, that's where the current day is. He tried to fight God and failed on his face. And the whole irony of it is he's going to be your stepping stone where you're going to beat God. Because that's the story of Calamity, is you're aiming to be that supreme being Exorox took the title of, because you'll be the strongest. You'll ascend the highest out of everyone. And Yaram will be the bridge between you and Exorox to go from a level that's beyond that planet to get to Exorox. At least that was all the old lore. The new lore, it's in the game. It's a lot more coherent. It's a lot simpler. It's not this universe-spanning thing where, the light gods are the gods of everything. A quick summary of the new lore is Exorox was a priest to the original dragons, and he took the soul of a dragon to become superpowered. It kind of scaled everything down to just planet level, where he took the soul of the Dragon King and is like, I am now the strongest god, because when humans take dragon souls now in the new lore, they become gods or whatever. It's the whole thing. If you want to do that, you can read it on their website. They have all the lore items there. But I really wanted to talk about the old lore, which they don't have there anymore. And I kind of wanted to have this immortal spot on the internet. If anyone has any other information or things I missed or got wrong, I'd love comments about it. To kind of make this video this big hot Mod Podge of all the old Calamity lore that's been out there. Or, I don't know how much mod is headcanon and stuff. I mean, it's lore from a mod of a game that never had lore in the first place. It's a lot. for something so small. But I like it. It's something I have a passion about. That's why I wanted to do a Calamity series. Still have never beaten Terraria. But that may change. So yeah, this is what the videos will be about. They probably won't be an hour long. They probably will still be about 40 minutes long. Depends on what I talk about next. It depends on how long I talk. Depends how much I got in me. So yeah. Thank you all for sitting here and listening to me ramble coherently, I will say, coherently compared to last time, about the lore of Calamity Terraria. Mostly. I think it was coherent. We'll see. Bye-bye.